Hey guys, it's Dr. Jensen. I'm here to give you your Module 1 overview as well as a brief lecture into some of the content for this week that you can use to draw from as you prepare for your assignments and your quiz. So make sure you give this video a watch and take a look at what we're going to be doing here. Okay, so I'm here in Module 1, responding to the threat and defining terrorism. You have some readings and videos we're going to go through, and I'll give you some background into those so you understand them better. So remember that terrorism is not just something from history that we study casually. It's an active problem that happens today, and it's important to understand how we define it and how we respond to it. So this is the best way to get started in a class like this. So what exactly do we mean when we say the word terrorism? We've had a lot of people chime in on this to try to pin this down because it would be hard to separate terrorists from everyday criminals versus insurgency and guerrilla fighters, or maybe just people who are assassins, okay? But actually the Hoffman text, which you'll begin this week with chapter 1, will start to shed some light on this, okay? So we're gonna look at this bottom part here for a minute. The most consistent theme in terrorism is the message, okay? So it's really symbolic messaging to spread fear through violence. That's it. Okay, violence is the language of the terrorists, and in the immortal words of Timothy McVeigh, when describing his victims, which were 167 people, including 19 children, and 684 people who were injured from the 1995 Oklahoma City bombing, he simply stated that those victims are collateral damage to his cause. So the terrorist doesn't really target victims specifically. Sometimes it's just more of a symbolic target. We're going to talk more about this as the class goes along. Let's start in the objectives tab here. So again, we're going to be going into the definitions of terrorism as well as distinguishing terrorists from other actors that are also violent. Then we're also going to look at a film from the FBI, which I'll talk about in a minute, that shows the lessons learned that they've had as first responders when they've been confronted with violence. Okay? And we'll look at some of these challenges that they experience when they do that. In the Thing About It tab, sometimes people pit local first responders against federal ones, and it's kind of interesting when that happens. There wasn't as good of partnering going on before 9/11, but the partnering has gotten so much better now, so it's kind of interesting how that's played out. Realize that the Department of Homeland Security is a relatively new agency. It was born in 2001. Thanks to 9/11. And most people don't know this, but a lot of other agencies report up to it, including the Secret Service and the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard used to be under the Department of Defense and military, but ever since 9/11, they've been moved under Homeland Security. In times of war, the Department of the Navy can activate the Coast Guard to respond to wartime activity. But other than that, it's seen as port authority and securing America's homeland. So it's kind of interesting to see how these kinds of things have changed over time. Okay, and we also kind of compare and contrast definitions that different agencies have between Department of Defense and the FBI. Which elements of definitions are more inclusive, which ones are more specific, and we'll get into that as you read. Your readings for this week include Chapter 1 from the Hoffman text, which you will definitely need for the quiz. And I also scanned some PDF sections of that text if you're still waiting for it to arrive. Maybe you ordered it and it's being shipped to you, so that way you can at least read through Chapter 1 and prepare for your quiz if it has not arrived yet. Also, you're going to be reading the Aurora, Colorado Police Department After Action Report from the shooting that happened in 2012. I just put in parentheses a few chapters and sections to read, and then everything else is optional reading. I've had students read this cover to cover because they've been so fascinated by what happened. If you remember, the Aurora, Colorado After Action Report was written in response to the Batman Theater shootings that happened in 2012. I've actually personally talked to the two sergeants that responded to those shootings. I've listened to the dispatch tapes of victims calling in to report what was going on, and it was very intense to experience, and I really appreciate them sharing those with me. And so I felt it was important for us to go through this event to try to determine, is this guy a terrorist? Is he an active shooter? What's the difference? but a lot of the same things are playing out in these incidents. As far as videos are concerned, you're watching your Module 1 overview video. Then we have a video, What is Terrorism?, going through what terrorist acts are. We also talk about defining terrorism. And then I have kind of a fun way to look at local law enforcement versus federal in interjurisdictional collaboration. And again, you'll want to see each of these before you attempt your quiz. And then finally, at the very bottom, you have the FBI film that I promised you called The Coming Storm. This film was built in 2016. It has very high production value, and it was meant to be a training film for specifically university shootings that happen. It has a lot of different people in it that kind of show you how it works. So you'll want to watch the entire film, including the introduction and the debriefings at the end that describe what we learned. They even interview a few of the victims from some of the recent shootings that we've experienced in the United States. So again, this is an FBI film. It is not classified. I got special permission from our special agent in charge from the state of Florida to use it. And I think you'll really enjoy it. It's very intense. It's, again, an active shooter. If this is disturbing to you or it bothers you, please let me know, and I'll provide an alternative assignment or material to go with it. But I think you'll really, really like it. In fact, most students want to watch this one with a classmate or a friend because it's very, very well done. And you learn a lot from it. It's one of the favorites of the class. Finally, in your activities, you need to know you need to complete your Getting to Know You discussion post, quiz 1 for Module 1, and your plagiarism quiz. So those are all links kind of built in and descriptions and instructions on how to complete those. Now, one other thing I want to mention is just overall for the class, if you go back into modules, some of the modules I'm, again, still messing with, okay? So they're not published or available yet because I'm tinkering with the material. Please be patient with me, but I'll have those modules as available as in advance as possible so you can work ahead. But again, please let me know how else I can help you. I think you'll be fascinated by the films and the readings of this week, taking you into a world that maybe you haven't really thought as much about. And I can't wait to share my stories with you. I've been very fortunate to meet with law enforcement and attorneys and sergeants and all kinds of people that have dealt with terrorists. We'll be reading interviews from terrorists. We'll be seeing some of the very best material that I can pull together across many, many years of teaching this class. So I hope you enjoy it, and welcome to week 1.